My friends and I had always heard the rumors about the old abandoned playground on the outskirts of town. They said that if you went there alone at night, you would never come back. They said if you listened closely, you could hear the faint laughter of all the children it had taken over the years. We couldn't resist finding out for ourselves. The playground, known locally as Whispering Woods Park, had been closed for decades. It was a sprawling, overgrown maze of rusted swings, creaky seesaws, and dilapidated slides that loomed like silent sentinels in the moonlight. The twisted remains of what had once been a joyful place for children to play had long since turned into a place of dread. My friends, Lucy, Jake, and Sarah and I decided to investigate the playground one night. Armed with flashlights and hearts pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, we made our way through the thick woods that surrounded the park. As we entered the clearing where the playground stood, an eerie stillness settled over us. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the rustling of the leaves in the wind seemed like ghostly whispers. The playground itself was a sight to behold. The equipment was covered in layers of rust and decay, and the once bright paint had faded to a sickly, peeling gray. Swings swung gently in the breeze, their chains groaning with each movement. We split up to explore, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Lucy and Jake headed toward the swings, while Sarah and I ventured closer to the crumbling slide. As I climbed the rickety ladder to the top, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That unseen eyes were following our every move. From my vantage point on the slide, I could see Lucy and Jake on the swings, their voices hushed as they whispered to each other. Sarah stood at the base of the slide, her flashlight illuminating the graffiti-covered walls of the playground's clubhouse. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice right next to me. It was a soft, plaintive cry, barely audible, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I called out to the others, asking if they had heard it, but they shook their heads, their expressions filled with confusion. We decided to investigate further, convinced that we were getting closer to uncovering the playground's dark secret. As we moved deeper into the park, the air grew colder and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. It was then that we stumbled upon a weathered old swing set, the seats swaying gently in the breeze. But what we didn't expect to see was the child who was sitting on one of those swings, swaying back and forth as if in a trance. My heart pounded in my chest as we approached her, our flashlights trembling in our hands. It was young and pale, her cheeks sunken and her eyes filled with a deep sadness, like she was holding back tears. She seemed to be unaware of us. As we watched, the girl's swing creaked to a halt, and she turned her sorrowful gaze toward us. Her lips moved soundlessly, as though trying to form words, but no sound escaped her. It was as though her voice had been stolen. Without warning, the girl suddenly got up and ran off into the darkness. We yelled for her to come back, and then ran after her. She was just here a minute ago. She couldn't have gotten far, but we couldn't see where she was. We ended up running in different directions, trying to find her, but with no luck. We regrouped and decided it was time to leave. This may have started as a silly ghost story, but now it was all seeming too real. As we made our way back through the woods, a sense of unease settled over us, as if something was coming back with us. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the whispers, the same ghostly voices that had haunted the playground. They echoed in my mind, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. I awoke in the middle of the night to find Lucy, Jake, and Sarah standing at the foot of my bed, their eyes vacant and their voices a chilling chorus of whispered pleas. "Come back to the playground," they urged. "Join us." I screamed in terror, scrambling out of bed, and ran through my house. Where were my parents? Why weren't they coming to help me? I ran out my front door, but to my shock, I didn't see my yard or my neighborhood. I was back in Whispering Woods Park, but the playground had changed. It was no longer the decaying, abandoned place we had explored the night before. The swings swayed in the breeze. The slides gleamed with fresh paint, and the laughter of children filled the air. But there were no actual children to be seen. But then I saw the familiar faces of my friends Lucy, Jake, and Sarah, smiling and beckoning me to join them. Their voices were no longer whispers, but joyful laughter, as though they had become part of the playground itself. I turned and fled, knowing that there was no escape from the nightmare that had enveloped us. The playground had claimed my friends, hungry for more souls. I ran into the woods, trying to find my way home, but no matter which direction I turned, I kept coming back to the playground. Every time I would see the pale, lifeless faces of the kids who had once been my friends. There was no way out. I couldn't take it anymore. I laid down on the ground, curled in a ball with my eyes clenched tight. Maybe I would wake up in my bed and this would all be a bad dream. If only things would have worked out that way.
The air was hot and dry as our construction crew worked tirelessly under the unforgiving sun. We had been tasked with expanding a highway through a desolate stretch of land, and the scorching heat made every task feel twice as long. We had no idea what awaited us when we stumbled upon it, a massive stone slab buried deep beneath layers of earth and sand. At first, we thought it was a natural rock formation, but the peculiar carvings etched into its surface suggested otherwise. Intricate symbols and strange hieroglyphics adorned the stone. It was fascinating. We may have stumbled upon some major discovery here. The crew gathered around the monolith, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Our seasoned foreman, John, approached the stone, his calloused fingers tracing the mysterious symbols. "I've never seen anything like it," he muttered, his brow furrowed in thought. "This ain't no ordinary rock. We need to call someone to take a look at it." And so we did. Within hours, a team of archaeologists arrived, their eyes widening in disbelief as they examined the stone. They said it was a tomb, a burial chamber of a civilization long forgotten. They spoke in hushed tones, speculating about its age and the potential significance it might contain. As the days passed, our construction site became a frenzy of activity. The archaeologists meticulously excavated the tomb, uncovering a labyrinthine network of tunnels and chambers. The air inside was damp and oppressive, carrying an ancient, musky odor. The deeper they delved, the more relics they uncovered. But it was the mural that adorned the tomb's inner chamber that we found the most unsettling. The mural depicted a huge, inhuman figure. It was surrounded by scenes of death and destruction, cities in ruins, people fleeing in terror, its dark, looming presence casting a shadow over all. The archaeologists dubbed it the bringer of doom. That night, as the archaeologists worked late to document their findings, a powerful sandstorm descended upon our camp. The wind howled, and the sky turned an eerie shade of crimson. It felt like the very earth itself was rebelling against our intrusion into the tomb's ancient chambers. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath us, and we were plunged into darkness. The power had gone out, and panic spread through the camp like wildfire. We fumbled for flashlights, our hearts pounding in our chests. In the tomb's inner chamber, the wall containing the mural fractured deeply during the earthquake. The archaeologists didn't even have time to run as they saw movement behind the wall. It emerged as a towering, grotesque monstrosity. Its eyes burned with malevolence, and it let out an otherworldly scream that sent shockwaves through the very air we breathed. We fled from the tomb in terror, the ancient evil close behind. I looked back to see it snatch one of the archaeologists off the ground and sink its teeth deep into his abdomen. The man's screams were like nothing I'd ever heard before, a sound I know I'll never forget. Finally reaching the outside, I found that the sandstorm had intensified. It was as if nature itself were attacking us. People vanished into the swirling sands, their screams silenced as I heard the ungodly creature tearing them apart. Our construction equipment lay buried, like forgotten toys in a giant sandbox. The desert landscape seemed to twist and contort, becoming a nightmarish shifting labyrinth. The few of us that were left huddled together for safety. John, the foreman, was among us, his face etched with guilt and fear. He had been the one to unearth the tomb, and now he felt responsible for the horrors that had been unleashed. "We need to find a way out of here," he said, his voice trembling. "We have to stop this thing." But the desert had become a maze of shifting dunes and treacherous terrain. Each step we took seemed to lead us deeper into the heart of the nightmare. The bringer of doom was relentless, its haunting presence always lurking just beyond our vision. Days turned into endless nights as we struggled to survive in this twisted, otherworldly desert. We could feel the ancient evil closing in on us, its malevolent gaze never wavering. It whispered in our minds, taunting us with promises of doom and despair. It was just playing with us now. We had almost no resources left, and every time one of us fell due to hunger or thirst, the bringer of doom would come and take them. With every man it consumed, it grew larger. Soon, it was so massive that it could hold a man in the palm of its hand. All hope seemed lost. Eventually, there was only me and John left. We lay on the desert floor, too weak to move when the bringer of doom returned. It bent down and picked John up from the sand. In one swift movement, it popped John in its mouth and swallowed. Then he picked me up. It was finally my time. But then, something happened I didn't expect. It perched me on his shoulder and spoke to me. It explained that I was to stay alive for what was going to happen next. It was my punishment for disturbing its ancient sleep. I had to watch as it laid waste to mankind. Cities crumbled and burned in the unrelenting terror of the Doombringer. And I was there to witness it all, never dying, until there will just be me and him alone in the darkness forever.
I awoke with a start, my heart pounding in my chest, as if it were trying to escape. The room was bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow, casting long shadows that danced upon the walls. I could hear a low, resonating hum that caused my whole body to vibrate, emanating from somewhere outside my window. This had become a nightly torment for me, a relentless intrusion into my life. The first time it happened, I dismissed it as a dream, a product of an overactive imagination. But as the nights wore on, I could no longer deny the horrifying truth. This was real. I lay paralyzed in bed, my breath catching in my throat. I was able to move my eyes just enough to look out my bedroom window. There, hovering just beyond the glass, were the visitors. They were tall and slender, with pallid, translucent skin that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly light. Their heads were large and bulbous, with giant eyes as black as ink. Panic washed over me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if they had stolen my voice, leaving me utterly helpless. I watched in terror as they floated closer, their elongated fingers reaching out towards the window. Then, just as they were about to break in, everything went black. I woke up the next morning in bed as if nothing had happened. Every night was the same thing. They would appear, tormenting me with their presence, inching closer and closer. I would lie there, paralyzed with fear, unable to escape their relentless gaze. It felt like they were probing my mind, searching for something they hungered for. As the nights turned into weeks, I became a shadow of my former self. I was sleep-deprived, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. I couldn't concentrate during the day, my productivity suffered at work, and soon my boss was asking questions. Eventually, I stopped going in altogether. I would avoid the phone when it rang, unable to face my friends and family. What could I tell them? One night, as they hovered outside my window, I gathered every bit of strength within me and forced myself out of my trance-like state. I sprang out of bed and stumbled toward the window, determination burning in my chest. I couldn't let these things keep me living in fear. I flung the curtains aside, revealing their grotesque forms. With a trembling voice, I screamed, "Leave me alone! What do you want from me?" Their eyes seemed to widen, and for a moment, they faltered. It was as if my defiance had surprised them. But then, for the first time, I heard their voices. It's hard to explain, but I didn't hear them with my ears, the way you normally would. Their voices were inside my head, a sort of strange, rhythmic chanting. The effect was sudden and alarming. I felt a searing pain in my head, and the room felt like it was spinning. I felt completely disoriented, as if they were digging into my thoughts, tearing them apart. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my head in agony. Images flashed before my eyes, and memories and thoughts ripped from my mind and laid bare. It was as if they were dissecting my very essence, sifting through the fragments of my life. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. They withdrew, retreating from the window and disappearing into the night. I was left on the floor, gasping for breath, my mind a jumbled mess. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Had they taken something from me? Some vital piece of my being? Or had they simply tortured me for their own sadistic pleasure? I may never know the answers. But one thing was certain, I had faced the terror of the unknown and emerged scarred but alive. The nightly visits had ceased, leaving me with a haunting question that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Were they truly gone? Or were they merely biding their time, waiting to return and finish whatever dark purpose had brought them to my doorstep? The nights grew quieter, and the once relentless tormentors ceased their visits. I cautiously began to rebuild my life, trying to forget the horrors I had endured. But deep down, I knew that I could never truly escape the terror that had invaded my existence. Months passed, and I forced myself to confront the memories that still haunted my every waking moment. I decided that perhaps the best thing for me would be to write down everything that had happened. Maybe then I could make sense of it all, or at least find some closure within my mind about what had happened. Late one evening, as I was hunched over my desk, poring over my notes and sketches, a familiar hum filled the room. Dread gripped me as I turned to the window, and there they were, waiting right outside. But this time, something was different. Their expressions were not ones of malevolence, but of desperation. They reached out to me, their gestures pleading, their eyes filled with an intensity I had not seen before. With a surge of courage, I approached the window, determined to confront them one last time. Again, I heard their voices in my head. I tried my best to focus, to stay calm. And slowly, their language began to make sense to me. "We need your help," they implored. "We are not invaders, but refugees from a dying world. We seek a new home, a place where our species can survive. We thought you held the key." I was taken aback. Their vulnerability struck a chord within me. Had my initial reaction to their presence been driven by ignorance and panic? Could they be telling the truth right now? They explained to me that soon they would be back. They knew this world could be their new home and how they could find peace with the people of this world. When they left that night, I tried to stay optimistic. I told myself that they were being honest with me, that they wanted peace. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind kept reminding me of the horrors they had put me through. Only time will tell what fate awaits us all.